I'd like to get into some introductions. Tia, would you mind introducing yourself to the folks and maybe telling us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Sure. My name is Tia Nellis, and I live in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago. I also work for TASH, which is a national and international advocacy organization that supports people with disabilities having inclusive lives, and works on many important legislations that affects people with disabilities. I am the self-advocacy engagement coordinator for TASH. I was their past policy director for TASH, and worked on policies when I lived in Washington, D.C.
Welcome, Tia.
Thank you.
William, would you be so kind to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
No, excellent. Thanks, Marshall. My name is William Kellibrew, and for the purposes of our session today, I am a self-advocate. I'm proud to say that. And I always start my story by talking about my history as a child. I experienced immense childhood trauma with the witnessing of my mother and brother's deaths at the age of 10 in our family living room. They were killed when I was 10 years old. And I can't begin to tell you how that impacted me as a child, and how that impacted my developmental, how that impacted me developmentally in elementary school, in junior high school, in high school, and throughout my life. But I said that I would also talk about today. Last night we had a really great discussion, and it brought up some interesting memories. And I remember when I was in the ninth grade and I graduated junior high school and went off to the 10th grade. And in 10th grade, I had to audition for the high school that I went to, called the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, where I would become a vocally trained. But in the 10th grade, I couldn't get through the entire 10th grade because in the 4th semester, my grades were really bad in the biology and English, and so academically, I was quote unquote failing all of my courses. But I was getting all A's and B's in the singing and the acting and all of the artsy stuff, right? Because that's what I love to do. And I remember having a meeting with my teacher and my grandmother one day, and I didn't realize that it was my fate on whether I would actually continue being in this school or not. But I remember that my grandmother and the teacher talking the whole time, and I didn't really probably know what they were really saying because I was tuned out. But when the teacher turned around and asked me at age 15, what did I think? I just shrugged my shoulders. And I couldn't advocate for myself. I couldn't speak up for what I wanted. And so I wasn't allowed to go to performing arts school again. The one thing that I loved to do was sing and be a part of the arts, and I couldn't sing anymore. And I went into residential treatment, where after I found that this wasn't working for me, I signed out of that, and the first stop that I made was to the GED office in Washington, D.C. to go get my GED, and guess what? I passed it on the first try. And they told me that I had to wait 20 minutes for my GED diploma. And I said, well, I don't have time. I've got to go out and get a job. So that started my trek on self-advocacy and speaking up for myself. And today, maybe more than a decade or more plus, decade plus, I'm still advocating for myself and others. And I'm just really great and proud to be a part of this panel, to be able to talk about what self-advocacy looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, and talk about the strengths of how we can move forward, and also how we can move forward in the field by being a model for what self-advocacy looks like. So thank you.
Thank you, William. Tia, can you share a bit about your experience growing up with a disability?
So when I was in school, there wasn't very much talk about what self-advocacy was or anything like that. So in school, we had to like figure out things on our own because a lot of times teachers didn't include people like today in their individual support plan, their IEP, their education plan. So when I was in school, I went to school and then as I was a senior in high school is when I found out after I was done with high school what an individual support plan was. By somebody coming to me at the University of Illinois Chicago where I worked at the time and saying, would you like to make a presentation about your individual support plan and your ISP and how you were included in school and talk about your goals and dreams? And I said, my what? And she said, you know, the things that you talked about, your goals and dreams in school. And I said, well, I don't think I had one of those. And she said, well, your mom and dad would have came, or your mom would have came, somebody from your family. Maybe one of your friends would have came to that and talked about it. And I said, well, I really can't talk about that. The only thing I had was from my Department of Rehab Counseling person came to my school and she asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I said I wanted to go and be a part of childcare, and that's what I wanted to do. And she said, well, do your parents have enough money to send you to college? And I said, I don't think so. They don't have a lot of money, so I don't think, and I heard college costs a lot of money, so I said, I don't think they have a lot of money. And then she said, would you like to work at a sheltered workshop? And I said, well, what's that? And she said, it's like factory work. And I said, well, I don't want to work in a factory. And so then she moved on to the third question and said, well, if you don't want to work in a shelter workshop, you can't afford to go to college, then I think you should stay at home. And the best thing to stay at home and watch TV and collect SSDI, Social Security Disability. And that's what was there, and that's what I started out talking to 150 Department of Rehabilitation counselors when I started talking in self-advocacy, to tell them that I wish my doors counselor was here today because I probably make more money than she does. But the important part of that too is like in school we're taking out from classes and sent to other classes for math and reading, and then by the time I got back to my regular class they were already finished with the other classes and they were doing math and reading, and then I wasn't included in that. And I remember how it was sitting at the beginning of the room and front of the room so that we didn't bother the other kids when we were leaving to go to our other reading and math class, and how separate it felt, because already right there you can feel that you weren't included in the class and doing the things that other kids were doing, and that gave them the opportunity to not include us in other things that they were doing. So that was really kind of a hard challenge there for people with disabilities, that already they excluded us by just doing that. Instead of helping us, they excluded us. So that's where I started after high school, is learning about self-advocacy.
Thank you for sharing that important part of your life. I'm also curious and want to ask a follow-up question. Who has mentored and supported you throughout your self-advocacy journey in your life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had a lot of people support me through my life. I think that there isn't only one support person that you can have in your life, and it's really important that people with disabilities understand that, because people have lots of strengths in different areas, and you use those strengths to call on the supports that can help you what they're strong in, which makes a better support for everybody. Like I have people that I could travel with. that when I called to say, okay, I would pick this person to help me travel and help me during the meetings. And then there's people that are good friends that I would be like, nope, they're not traveling with me. But then there's also people that could go to meetings with me and support me really well in meetings. And so that's really helpful to know those people on the different things that they can support you on. My friend Leanne Rushi was the first person who taught us about self-advocacy and brought it to Illinois. And that was after I was done with high school. And she was the person who also talked to us about speaking up and what it was. And we didn't know what self-advocacy was or speaking up, or even what discrimination was. And how to be able to trust that you don't have to agree with everything that everybody says. Because when you were in school, or your parents always taught you to have respect for your elders, and you don't talk back, and you definitely don't disagree. So one of the greatest things that she did is helped us disagree with her. So she would ask us all kinds of questions and say, is this right? And then one time I was like, I disagree. And she's like, yes. But you had to learn to do that. And sometimes people think that you have to have permission to agree or disagree or state your own opinion. And that's why self-advocacy is really important to learn even younger ages. The earlier the better, because then people won't be afraid to speak up and to be able to talk to people about their dreams. And one of the other things is listening. We need more people to listen. Listening is very important. If you do anything that's really good, it's listening to people with disabilities about what they want and what their dreams are, because they can tell you if you give them the opportunity to listen.
Thank you so much. That's such an important point. And I really like that you raised the idea of being able to question people, elders, people in authority, and just having that permission and opening up that space to make those conversations. So I thank you for that and being a leader in that. That's amazing. William, I want to talk to you about some turning points in your life. You had already mentioned your experiences going through the education system. Do you want to share with folks a little bit more about these turning points in your younger years?
Yeah, there were, I think, many turning points. There probably were points that needed to be turned, given the experience that I had as a child. But I will point to after my mom and brother's murders at age 10, I didn't have therapy. I didn't really have like guidance counselors I don't remember having guidance counselors or it being a conversation. Our family strategy was really to forget about it. That was the easiest thing for our family to do. And at 13 years old, I went to school and I put on my book bag one day and I said, I don't want to be here on earth anymore, because the anxiety, the feeling, I just felt like I had missed my family so much. I couldn't be here. I couldn't bear to think and feel on earth. And so I tried to attempt suicide at age 13 and tossed myself off of this bridge in Washington, D.C. And I remember standing there and debating whether I'd go to heaven or hell, and that was confusing. Number two, I debated whether I'd ever see my mother and brother again, and that was very confusing for me. So I said, jokingly now, but back then, I said, I'll come back at 3:00, where all the decisions are made in school, right? So I went to school, and it was my assistant principal who recognized that I did not look like the William that he saw every day coming to school. I had masked whatever that was, and so after that, he called my grandmother at Children's Hospital. Called my grandmother at Washington Hospital Center where she worked. She called Children's Hospital, and they got me to my first ever, at 3 years after the killings, they got me to my first assessment at Children's Hospital. And that's where I was hospitalized for 30 days at another hospital. And after I was discharged after those 30 days, I met this therapist Christine Pierre, and she was my introduction to the mental health system. And she took me to the cafeteria. I always tell this story, but she took me to the cafeteria, and back to what you were saying, Tia. You know, we just listen to people what they want. But she put her hand up toward the food in the cafeteria and said, "What would you like?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking to myself, I'm on a 1-to-1, lady, I don't know how much money you have, but I'm going to clean your pockets out." I'm a growing teenager, and my favorite thing in the world back then was ice cream. I'm lactose intolerant now, TMI, but that goes to show you that I ate a lot of ice cream. So I went into that cafeteria, and I must have built the biggest ice cream cone you could build on this side of earth. And I mean, like kids do, licking it because I needed to make sure enough was there, was standing up. But whatever happened in those sessions at age 13, if I was to say this is equilibrium where I'm feeling like I can cope with life, I was here. And Christine Pierre's opening up and listening to me, I got just a step further toward being able to cope every day. And I think that was the biggest turning point for me, because where I felt like my dignity had been snatched away at age 10, just kind of ripped from me, it was my opportunity to gain something back. And I just kept going and kept going. And I will say today, what's interesting, I reached back out to this, I tried to find this lady, Christine Pierre, and after 25 years, and I put her name in the Google box, and Google field, and about 25 million of them showed up. So I started contacting some Christine Pierres. And I ended up, about 3 weeks later, I got a call from the office saying, you know, are you trying to reach a Christine Pierre? And they gave me a number. And I called this number, and this is how the conversation went, ring, ring. And I said, "Hello, may I speak to Christine Pierre?" And the person on the other end of the line said, "Yes, this is Miss Pierre." And I said, "Wow. And did you work at Children's Hospital back in 1987? And she said, "Yeah, I did." And I said, "Wow, Miss Pierre, this is William Kellibrew. Do you remember me?" And she said, "No." But she said, "Tell me a little bit more about who you are." And I said, well, I started to tell her my story about my mom being killed, my brother being killed. And she said, "You know what? I actually do remember you." She said, "I remember you. I don't remember your name. I vaguely remember your face. But I remember I had to tell you something when I was your therapist back then. 25 years later, what did you have to tell me?" And she said, "I'll tell you." And she said to me that when she was my therapist, her mother died. So what I was seeing was her coping in those sessions too. But her heart was bigger. Her humanity, she wore on her sleeve. And she opened up a door for me that she never told me that what it was, but it was her actions. It was her behavior in those therapy sessions that really did it. What I didn't know, I said, "Well, Miss Pierre, I do all these speeches all over the world. What was your job back then?" And she said, "You know, William, I was an intern social worker." And I said to myself, "An intern saved my life?" Anybody can do this work. But it goes to show you that everybody plays a role. And no matter how minuscule we think that role is, from the lifeguard to the bus driver to the janitor to the cafeteria worker, everybody who passes a child has a role to play. And today I'm just extremely proud that she told me that she was in her first year, which in social work, you have a foundational year and an advanced year for 2 years. She was in her foundational year getting her social work degree at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, where I am an advanced social work intern today, seeing my clients. She really inspired me. She inspired me. Turning points.
Thank you so much, William. I'm loving the connections that I'm seeing between your two stories and how important it is just to listen and, you know, the impact that's had on your life. I thank you for sharing that, and thank you for, you know, pointing out that, you know, it's an easy thing to do, but it's such an impactful thing. And like Brian had said earlier, you know, we really have to listen and stop just hearing people. So Tia, I would also like to ask you, how what would be your advice for young people that want to share their stories and become self-advocates? What would be your advice for young people with disabilities?
My advice for young people is to keep speaking up, keep talking to people. If one person doesn't listen to you, go to another person. But the most important thing is to keep using your voice and telling people about your goals and dreams. Because there are people out there who are going to listen to you someday, and they are going to help you build your goals and dreams out there. I think the best part of my job is that I get to learn all these skills from other people who've been there for me along the way, like we've been talking about. But then to go out and train other people with disabilities to speak up and to share my leadership skills with others and to support them. We may not be there all the time in the same room physically, but to know that we're there with you. First time you speak up, the first time you say your name, the first time you do something important, the first time you tell somebody you want a job or live in the community or a relationship. Those are all important things. And to some people, just saying your name might not be a big deal to all of you, but to that person, it's the first time they use their voice and express the things that they want and that are important to them. So it is a big deal. One of the things that we have at our conferences is something called open mic. And we give people a chance with disabilities to speak up and talk about anything that they want to. And the best part of my job is that I get to share all those skills with other people that are learning how to do that. And then to know that one day when they're out there speaking up or talking, how good it feels to know that you've made a difference in somebody's life and gave them all those skills and opportunities to do that you might have not had when you were younger, but you passed it on to other people and give them that voice and those choices and those dreams, and to be there to that person, to listen to that person and share those stories with them and give them the courage to speak up, because that's really important. And that's the only way that you're going to get the things that you want in your life and your dreams, is by speaking up and telling your stories, no matter how you do it. You know, you might do it with pictures, you might do it with sign language, you might do it in other countries, different languages. You might point to something, you might have somebody who understands you so well that you don't need to say anything, that they just are able to tell what you want by your expressions, by your emotions, what you like and what you don't like. And one more thing about school is I never had the opportunity to go to college at first, but this is something that I'm really excited about, is because during that time you had to pass an SAT, ACT testing, and most of the time for schools and colleges they don't let you in unless you do that. So I didn't have a place to go where they didn't make that happen. Sometimes the only classes that you could take, and some places don't make that happen, but for people with disabilities, colleges were saying, oh, you can't pass the SAT, or you could go to a different college, a community college, and some of those community colleges just had life skills. Well, I said, I don't go to school to make my damn bed. I go to school to learn. So I was finally able to talk to Syracuse University. It's called Inclusive U. And I was able to convince them that not only that would you accept me in school, but they didn't even have an online program. And I was living in DC at the time, and I had a full-time job. But to create disability studies online for a student who had a disability who wanted to come to school. And I was able to do that. And so last year I was able to graduate from Syracuse University with a certificate in disability studies.
All right.
So I'm hoping that people with disabilities don't have to go through all these things. that we had to. And that's why it's so important with our work, our self-advocacy work, to keep doing it, because other people with disabilities need those opportunities and those dreams too.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations,
Thank
and
you.
just thank you for being such a change maker in this important space. William, I'm curious, who or what does mentorship look like for young people, and how does a healthy relationship look like for between a mentor and a young person?
Yeah, I think that's very important, and often some of our mentors are our peers, those individuals who model even what resiliency could look like. I mean, when we go to elementary school or junior high school, we're often looking around and looking at other students and how they're behaving, and that's very impactful. So I think that for me, I was on the I got into the spelling bee when I was in elementary school, or in college I became the student government president twice over. But living with emotional disability and being able to manage school and manage those things, I became a model for the campus that they didn't know at first that I even had these experiences. It took 4 years for my campus to even know what was actually happening, because every day I showed up and I was helping other students. I was the biggest volunteer, V written on my forehead, helping everybody and everywhere succeed. I remember being in the finance. It took me 3 times to get in school at age 27. And one time I filled out the application and I didn't, I just let it go, right? So I lost $20, all right? That was real impactful for me at that time. $20 made a difference for me at that time. Still does, but we're making a little bit more to you, right? All right. But the second time I got into the, I went to the school and I didn't get in. I went to the financial aid line and I was sitting there, and it was so scary in that financial aid line because I was a first generation. I didn't have anybody with me. It was the scariest thing. And so what I did was, when I got to the door, I left. I just walked out and said I was just really scared to go through it. The third time, I got through the financial aid line, got registered, finally got myself into school. And I think when I became the student government president, I made sure there were volunteers at every stage of the process to ensure that if people even felt like they didn't want to go through it, that they could do it. And even today, I still speak to some of those students and their moms who were standing in that line, who got through and were just as anxious as I was in that line. And I think that we just have to pave that kind of way, but also reach out to other individuals who might be experiencing things. Because like Tia said, many of us we don't speak up. We don't have the voice to speak up. Our voices my voice was physically taken away from me when I was 10 years old. I couldn't even speak. There was nothing else to say for me. I was so in shock from the murders that I had to gain a little bit of voice every single day. So to become a speaker today, even doing international work on speaking, I look back on that and I think about who mentored me along the way. My grandmother was an amazing person because that was her only daughter, right? She lost her only daughter. And she worked on her job for 38 years as a sterile processor. She finally got to be a supervisor, but she probably was making around $30-something thousand a year taking care of another generation. But what I watched her do every day was, regardless of whether we gave her, pardon my word language here, but we gave her hell in that house. Traumatized kids, 5 of us, we gave her hell. Running away from home as a 13-year-old, we gave her hell. But one thing she did every day was she made sure I had that $5 for school, for extra lunch. She made sure that I had those bus tokens to get there. She kept at me, and she just kept at me, whether I wasn't speaking to her or not. She kept at me. And I had, that experience of watching somebody who just kept going and kept going. So she mentored me. She showed, whether she knew it or not, she was showing me what getting through it could look like. And so today, she's still alive. We've taken her driver's license away. But but she's wonderful now, and I had the opportunity to speak at the first ever childhood oversight hearing on trauma for U.S. Congress a couple of years ago, or the Oversight Committee. And as I was given my 8 minutes to speak, I made sure that my speech was about 6 minutes or so, because I said to Congress, I always wanted to do this, but I said, I yield the rest of my time to my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And that's where she was able to be recognized, and Congress asked her, a Congress member asked her to stand up, and she was recognized. When she stood up in Congress, what it told me was that I didn't really have to look far from my mentor. I didn't have to look far from my peer. But my grandmother also told me one time when I was 13 or 14 or 15 years old, when I was giving her hell, she grabbed me by my wrist one time and she said, you may have lost your mother. She said, but you don't know how it feels like to lose a child. So you can give me hell all you want, but I'm going through something too. And what it told me was respect everybody's trauma. Respect everybody's going through whatever that is. That we're no greater than anybody else. And while we're going through our pain, there could be somebody else going through theirs. So I think that in terms of mentorship and in terms of being a peer, it's really modeling what that looked like and gaining the strength from others and around us in our community and building on that and building on our strengths and not our deficits. We can't build on deficits. Our strengths, when we think of building a foundation for a home, we build a home on a weak foundation, it is not going to last. It's not going to last. But we build it on a strong foundation and support kids. And the one thing that I found, what Tia mentioned, the last thing I'll say about this is, the one thing that I found, one of the things that I found that can make the difference in a child or adult or a person's life who is going through trauma or going through really tough times is skills building. Being able to build more skills to be able to cope every single day with the tragedies, with the challenges that we face every day. And so I think that's one of the things that helps us build, is looking for mentors and identifying people that we can trust and building that relationship. Yeah.
Wow, I really appreciate how that's such a beautiful way to honor your grandmother. And where I'm from, and I'm sure a lot of other folks here can relate, is that our grandmothers are usually the ones that are holding it down. And we call that a matriarchal system where I'm from, where the grandmothers are the ones that hold our families together. They're the ones that pass on knowledge. They're the ones that take care of us. And that's such a beautiful way to have your grandmother honored for all the important things that she's done in your life.
No, thank you very much. I was going to say earlier, I learned a harsh reality at age 10, watching my mother and brother die. I learned a harsh reality that there was nothing more important than family that day. And I've learned that there's nothing more important than the human being and, by the way, animals too, because I love my animals, by the way, everybody. They don't always get the just they deserve, but animals do a heavy lift for some of us. And I just say that was a harsh reality. So I always say to myself, I can't leave anything, I can't take anything away from me when I leave this earth in this physical form. So I'm not materialistic, right? I don't get angry over loss of anything anymore. If I lose something, I'm like, okay, I just lost it, I'll find it again. So that's kind of how I am today. I put the value in the people now and the relationships today. Whereas when I was a kid, I was so fixated on the material things. That's the farthest thing from my brain. I tried to buy a Camry, and my partner said, no, we need a Mercedes. I'm like, I buy a Camry because it lasts a long time. But so does a Mercedes. But it's not about the material things that matters. It really is about the people in our lives. And so that's a big lesson for me today.
Tia, I want to ask, how have you used your life experiences to create a path forward?
Well, as I said before, I do many speaking engagements around self-advocacy, around talking just like this about relationships, about speaking up, many presentations around how important it is for people with disabilities to focus on their goals and dreams that they want that are important to them and keep talking about them to other people. And I also, are doing many other leadership opportunities and committees that I have been a part of. And so that's been really great. I've been just appointed to the President's Committee on Intellectual Disabilities, which is really exciting. To help talk about writing a white paper around hopefully many different things that are important to people with disabilities, like HCBS rule and employment and community and all those things that are important to do that, and also to be able to be a part of these kind of conferences that you in exchange with different countries. And it's so exciting to find out, what other countries are doing around disability. How are you making a difference in your country? Or how can we help you make a difference in your country to the people with disabilities? And, being a part of having different ways of learning how people open up conferences like this. Different countries sometimes tell stories before they get started with their country doing. Other people have Indian tributes to, to different places, different things before they start their conference. Just learning about how other people join and network and start communicating in different ways. It's been really exciting. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of support people in my life who've helped me along the way. Be able to speak up for the things that are important to me and the things that I want. It starts out with self-advocacy as building your own self-esteem, because that's really important to people with disabilities. It's defining who you are and having that courage to say what's important to you, and then learning along the way and building those skills and having people help you learn those leadership skills. And then the last thing is being a good self-advocate is to share your experiences and to mentor younger people along the way so that they could speak up, because we're not going to be here forever. So we need to help other people find their voice. But that doesn't mean that just because there is, that you should help young people find their voice and then say, oh, well, that's the end of you. It also means making sure those people who have been involved in the movement for a long time stay involved by supporting and mentoring others and doing some of the same things that other people have done. So that when you're no longer there, they could take over and do some things like that and speak out. But it's also a time of everybody working together. So what we need to make this a better world is everybody working together as a team. We have a saying, it's called TEAM, and it stands for Together Everybody Achieves More. And so if you can do that and work together with everybody, it's not us and them, it's all of us. So if you can do that as a team and start working with everybody and helping people have opportunities to speak up, have opportunities to have jobs in all kinds of positions in your organization, not just making copies at the copy machine or faxing or doing shelter work, but real important jobs, real jobs, real pay, and real money. And I got that opportunity. I worked at the University of Illinois, Chicago for 25 years as a self-advocacy specialist. And now I have a retirement. I have holiday paid. I had benefits. With my retirement, I have health insurance for life, which is great. And more people with disabilities need those same kind of opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tia and William, for sharing your knowledge and all the experiences that have led you up to this point in life. I'm just so honored to share space with you. I want to ask you more questions, but I'm sure there are folks in the audience who would love to ask you some questions. So I'm going to open it up to a Q&A.
Hello, my friend Tia. I'm so proud of you. What a
Thank
great
you.
job. A lot of us are trying very hard to include people with disabilities as part of governance, as advisors, as people who can tell us the best way to create policies. But from your point of view, how do we best support people with disabilities in advisory groups, in stakeholder meetings? I think a lot of us have struggled with that over time, trying not to just make it tokenism. But what advice would you give this group for really how to earnestly support people with disabilities so we hear their voices?
So I guess it depends on the group that you want them to participate in, giving them the opportunity to maybe come to some of the meetings before they decide whether or not they want to be a part of that group, to observe some things, to, if they need support, to let them pick their own support person if possible, because that really is helpful. We have been developing a guide called from Inclusion International and the International Down Syndrome Organization called Listen, Include, Respect for people with how to include people with intellectual disabilities. That's done by self-advocates from both sides, from the International Down Syndrome Organization and Inclusion International. It's available on the Inclusion International website. We're still working on more parts of it, but it talks about how to include people in meetings and organizations, how to hire people with disabilities, include them in your organization around employment. It gives you resources and tips about the things that you should and shouldn't do. So I would check that out, and there's probably many other self-advocacy, different guides and manuals out there also to help you do that.
That was great. That was there's a resource. So
Yeah.
Hi, Tia. This is Isabel Hodge from the U.S. International Council on Disabilities. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the work that you did during COVID in, bringing together people with intellectual disabilities that weren't able to go out in the community. That Friday group meeting that we used to have. I think it's still going on. I'm not sure. If you could share that, I think everybody would benefit from that.
Thanks. She's been talking about Tash. During COVID, we were trying to figure out what was happening around people with disabilities handling COVID and being stuck at home and not being available to do a lot of things on the outside. So people were getting lonely, like you said, and like depressed and didn't have anybody to talk to. And some people were having family members or friends pass away during that time. So we set up a self-advocacy coffee break, which self-advocates can go onto on Fridays at 3 to 4 Eastern Time, 2 to 3 Central Time. So people with disabilities can get on there. We do a couple of questions, and at first it was a lot about COVID and helping people deal with what was going on. And now it's become a lot more than that. It's an opportunity for people to talk about different questions, icebreakers, different things that are happening in their lives, sharing things. We were just talking about it earlier. People feel very comfortable on that coffee break, so sometimes they share things that maybe their parents wouldn't want them to share in front of the whole nation, but like someone was talking about, hi, my name is whatever, and my parents are getting divorced. Okay. But that's how comfortable people felt about that, to be able to share, anything that's happening in their life. And that's what's really cool about it. And we have a certain set of people that get on all the time since the very beginning, which became really good friends, and they support each other. They share emails, they share different conferences and things that are going on in their self-advocacy groups. They invite people to be a part of that. We set up a vote thing one time to talk about voting, and then to talk about how at the beginning Congress wasn't including people with disabilities in the vote plan, around the COVID plans. They weren't having those things. So we set up an extra meeting, and we helped people write to Congress about why it was important to help people with disabilities be a part of this plan. Like you have to include us, we're people going through COVID the same thing as everybody else. And so what we did is we had somebody type, and we typed in their congressperson, and they talked about what was important to them to tell Congress why it was important to include people with disabilities in COVID. It was awesome. Some of the people got back on the Friday call, and they were just like, oh my God, my senator wrote to me. I got a letter from my senator. They were so happy. I got a letter from Congress. And they were really happy. And they shared that experience with their organization, the directors and the caseworkers and the managers and their direct support professionals. They shared that letter, and they talked about how important it was to them. And then that gave agencies opportunities and suggestions about how important it is to include people with disabilities when they go talk to legislators, Congress, to anybody like that, and to be able to give opportunities for people to share their stories. Congress always tells you, and your legislators and senators always tell you, they hear from professionals, they hear from parents, they hear from researchers. What they don't hear from is people with disabilities. And how can we make that a difference, an impact on what they're going to pass and what they're not going to pass? And some of these laws, legislation, by hearing from people how that affects their lives, could make a big difference whether or not something passes or doesn't pass. And so I think it's really awesome opportunity for when you go to these places, don't only take other coworkers, but also take people with disabilities with you. Help them write their stories, share their stories with you. That can make a difference in whether or not something gets one person, just one person can make a difference. And right now, the way the world is going, we need everybody to use their voice and speak up and to be included, because we need your mother, your father, your grandmother, your dog, your aunt, your uncle, everybody to speak up so that we can make a difference.
And building on that, one of the things I was able to do is join the Center for Public Representation. Kathy Costanzo, Executive Director, I've been on the board now I think for 3 years. And having a voice in places where decisions are being made about how organizations move forward with respect to people with disabilities. Also, we had a congressional hearing. Well, I wouldn't call it a hearing, but it was an opportunity for congressional staff to come out and hear about, some of hear the voices of individuals, of people with disabilities. So I think bringing it to Congress in many different ways, in different formats, is so important.
Salman Abraham, Director of the Wellness Institute. Question for both of you. We do community-based work. You mentioned something very important, that we need more voices out there. How can we encourage people who have lived experience but are shy or silent to speak up, to get more involved, to become self-advocates, and to really get out there into the community?
Oh, wow.
Well, I think one of the things that you could do is to inform people in a way that they would understand what you're working on as an organization. Because sometimes people just hand out things that are really hard for us to read. Like they use a lot of jargon, a lot of big words, a lot of initials. I mean, you could go on with initials for every day of the week. But I think that that's one part that you can do. You can have other self-advocates who are leaders come and speak to people with disabilities about why speaking up is so important. You could send them to conferences or other workshops that include disability self-advocacy, different starting the beginning of self-advocacy. You can have other leaders talk to them and encourage them to speak up. I know like some people are really shy. Like I can be up here now talking like this, but when we first started self-advocacy, believe me, when they said, well, for 5 minutes you have to speak, and we were like, 5 minutes? And now we're like, oh, you're only giving us this amount of time?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it takes a lot of, support, for people to get that courage. But once they start getting that courage to speak up and start talking and having good experiences, they'll start using their voice. And then you can't get the microphone away from them.
Yeah,
But-
and your champions,
Yeah.
your champions are the individuals that you're reaching out to, people that you're reaching out to. So building on those voices. Look at how we started the conference. Look at the voices starting this conference. I think putting the value on lived experience in the voices. This is why we're here, to be able to support community. So I think this is part of that. So giving a platform, because a lot of people take the platform and they're using it and they're advocating, but providing a space and a platform for individuals or people with disabilities to be able to lead in the space, I think is important. And to trust them to lead in the space.
And also to remember that self-advocacy is a movement. It's not a program. So you can't just get a manual and boom, you're a self-advocate. You have to make sure that people have those experiences, opportunities to speak out, to share their voice, to experience some of those things, to take risk. That's the other thing. Don't fix everything for everybody. Let us take risk. Let us fail. That's how we learn. You're not going to be there forever to pick up all our crap when we do something that's not, that we make a mistake about. So that we have to be able to have the resources and the supports in place so we know what to do when something is like we're lost, or who can we call, or how can we talk to somebody? Who do we talk to when this goes wrong? Or who do we talk to when this goes right? To remember to celebrate, because it's so important to celebrate. We forget to celebrate our accomplishments at times. We always oh, we've done this, but now we got to do this. Now we got to do that, and now we got to do that. And people burn out right away. But if you learn how to celebrate your accomplishments, people then get re-energized and they keep going and they keep wanting to celebrate that. And also give back from what you've learned, because one of my first mentor I told you about, she always said to us, okay, you're in a leadership role, but don't get too cocky, because I can always knock you down a couple of steps. But she also made us where we don't forget where we came from. And that's really important, not to forget where you came from when you are a leader, to go back and give back, and not just take all the credit all the time, and to give credit to other people where it's due. Yeah.
Hello, I'm from Georgia, and my question to the both of you is, hearing you guys speak was wonderful, but my question is, what do you hope to see I guess, in the next few years that you have been working towards, and also, and how do you, I guess, want to be reminded, and also, what do you see in the next few years? And I'm also from the Center for Leadership and Disability at Georgia State University. I have to say that. Thank you.
I just think it's just, I mean, one word, I think just to give, because I do want to hear that question too, but I think one word is, equity. Tia, I think, beautifully talked about what equity could look like. Parity in pay, making sure that it's just not doing the copy jobs or things like that, that the trust is there to be able to, advance in the work. And so I think that's a biggie. Health equity and equity also, disabilities rights, things like that. So improving upon that and seeing the leadership of more people with disabilities in leadership roles, and not to be afraid to not being stigmatized for being able to actually say that I'm a person with disabilities, right? So I mean, it takes a lot. Honestly, it takes a lot to be sitting here and saying these words, sitting on the stage, because it's very frightening, as like Tia said, when you're first doing that. But I think that we're putting out time where our value is.
And my word would be respect. Because if you respect someone, you won't let bad things happen to them. If you respect someone, you won't talk bad about them. If you respect someone, you'll accept their disability and who they are, and for what they can and can't do, you'll respect that.
Yep.
And I think the more people would respect people with disabilities, they wouldn't talk horrible about them. They wouldn't let those things happen to people. Right. They would be out there making a difference and advocating for the things that are important to them to help make their lives better and your lives better. Mm-hmm. People with disabilities aren't just doing it for themselves. We're also doing it for you. So that's what I think. I think respect, if people could respect somebody with a disability, they wouldn't let those bad things happen to them. And they would be there for them when they need it.
Big time.
One more question and short and sweet answers?
Yep.
Hi, William. My name is David. I serve on the Prime Minister's Youth Council of the Government of Canada. And you mentioned how everyone can play a part in supporting each other when it comes to mental health and trauma responses. What would you say is the best way that young people can be a part of that support, especially in our home communities and on college campuses?
I think a lot of what we've talked about is at first acknowledging, people's existence. I mean, acknowledging and respecting people, because, trauma can be debilitating and dehumanizing. And so I know that for me, I lost my dignity. I'm just flat out. I didn't even know what the word dignity meant. But when I found out what it meant, I said, oh, I know that's been stripped from me. So in order to get that back, I think that, a lot of movements actually start with a lot of young people. When we look at the civil rights movement, it started with a lot of young people, right? A lot of people in college who are like, oh, they've got the time to go out there and rock and roll and get in front of everybody, get arrested for the causes, things like that. Not that older people can't do that, but a lot of younger people have started these movements. And I say, Steve, even today, continue to push on, continue to support, the movement to make what is invisible visible, so that people can understand what's going on and be able to identify what trauma is. But don't end there. Be able to identify what healing also looks like, because it's not just about the trauma. Acknowledge it, but you know what? How do we get through it every single day? Because we've got to go to work. We've got to be able to engage our families in a very healthy way. And so I think that young people play a major role in that. And I think what we're going to see, even from this conference, is the continuation of the movement of young people to make a difference in the leadership of how we get there.
And I think disability pride.
All right now.
Making sure that people with disabilities know that they should be proud of who they are.
That's right.
And, we hear all the things that we can't do and all the things that we need to learn, and all the things that all the things that what other people think about you, but to make sure that other people know that you should be proud of who you are, and to gain those skills to learn how to do that. Telling other people what good things they are a part of and what they do that make them proud, and to celebrate all those differences. And I think that that's a really huge thing. And I think in self-advocacy, as I said before, it starts with self-esteem so that people can be proud of themselves and they can have that courage, and keep encouraging people, other people that you meet. Like we had in Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, we had somebody who wanted to be a part of a committee, but she was afraid to raise her hand. And I'm just like, how bad do you want this? What's important to you, I'm like, raise that hand. And she did it. And then she was like, oh my gosh, I can make a difference on this committee. I can start speaking up. But giving that people an encouragement to do that, and say that you're always with them in spirit. You might not be with them, in person all the time, but encouraging them, saying, that's great, you're speaking out, pushing them to the next level, and really helping them along to get that pride of who they are.
Well, thank you so much for all your amazing questions. We're going to move into our closing now, and I'm going to invite William to send us off.
Well, I am going to sing a song. I remember just before the pandemic, at the big conference that we had, like maybe it was 3 years ago. Was that right? Yeah, 3 years ago. So I sang a song. So I'm going to sing this song called "You Raise Me Up," and I think it's. I'm at a loss for words for a second. You do get nervous sometimes. I went back to my first days of speaking for a moment. But my mother used to wake us up on Saturday mornings and get us to clean the house to like Boy George and stuff like that. She loved Prince and Boy George. Oh, you can start it. Go ahead. It's an intro. Keep the tech going. So yeah, we used to get up on Saturday mornings and clean the house. But my mom loved music, and so I told you that it's a harsh reality. I wasn't able to take anything when I was a kid with me from our family home, so I didn't own anything material from the past. But one thing I had, and I remember being in residential treatment on a 72-hour seclusion. And the only thing I had was my voice. And I could just sing the entire time. I think Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You" came out at the point, so I was like loving myself. And those words were just ringing in my ear, and how much I appreciate that transfer, and how music is so, has an ability, a capability of being able to move us in a very positive, even a spiritual way. And so this is dedicated to this room today and beyond, for this movement we're talking about, right, Tia?
Right.
When I am down and all my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart's burdened to be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas, and I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. And I think back to all of those mentors and those people who made a difference. I mean, thinking back to all the peers and everybody who's made a difference in the field, in the movement, you know, I just really appreciate them. And you know what? Let's give, oh my gosh, Tia and Marshall, give it up. You've got to give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Wonderful. What an honor. You raised me up so I can stand on mountains. You raised me up to walk on stormy seas. And I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. And I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to all that I can be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.